welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet, and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Jason. Good to be back for another episode, and I'm excited to chat about all things Calgary soccer related.
Yeah, but before we get into it again, if you are a new listener, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
So we are going to focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level.
So we didn't do a podcast last week, so I thought we would do a review of the last two Cavalry matches. Let's real briefly talk about that first home match for Vancouver FC and the 1-1 draw between the Cavs and Vancouver.
Yeah, it was another frustrating one for Cavalry, considering they had a man advantage for probably an hour, if not more, of playing time after a red card to Rocco Romeo of Vancouver at the half-hour mark. So disappointing to not take advantage of having an extra player for the majority of the match. Of course, it is on the road. It was Vancouver's first ever home game, so they had a pretty passionate and big crowd backing them, but it felt like another missed opportunity for Cavalry to gain their first win of the season.
Yeah, I think when you have an expansion team down to 10 men for, 3/4 of the game, you should be more dominant. They didn't really, in that first half, I think they really didn't get any real legit shots. And I just found that when I was watching it, that they had a lot of possession, but it wasn't really going anywhere. There wasn't any real pressure. So yeah, I thought it was a frustrating game for sure. At least you can make the argument they got a point on the road.
Yeah, you got a point on the road. They did. I was kind of surprised looking at the stats because I was curious. I felt like they did outshoot Vancouver. It turns out they outshot Vancouver 19-10, and Cavalry had 72% of possession, nearly completing 600 passes, which is pretty decent. But of course, they were up a guy for an hour of play, so that shouldn't really be a surprise. And yeah, disappointing to only generate one goal from having that much of the ball and having that many chances created. So yeah, they passed a lot, shot a lot, but didn't really manage to do too much.
And then last weekend, HFX came to town and we saw yet another draw. This one was 2-2. This one, I have to admit, was the first match this season. I didn't get to watch the full 90 minutes, but it did look like a fun one. You were there, Scott. How was it?
Yeah, it was a fun one to cover, and I have a lot to say about it, so bear with me here. Overall, I mean, that's the fifth tie of the CPL season for Cavalry, 5 straight ties, and their opponent, Halifax, they have also tied 5 straight. So if you went into this match expecting anything other than a draw, I think you could have maybe looked at the table and maybe reevaluated your prediction. But no, Cavalry started really, really well. They took a deserved 1-0 lead about halfway through the first half through a nice bit of play, a nice shot from Ali Musi, but a really nice bit of play before that from Charlie Trafford. Musi was having a really strong start to the match, but it all unraveled defensively, kind of approaching halftime. Cavalry conceded 2 cheap goals really out of nothing back-to-back in the 46th and 48th minute, and went into the halftime break down 2-1. And I think this was the first time I've ever noticed this happening. Cavalry players were booed as they exited the pitch at halftime by the supporters section. So
really.
They were, yeah, and I even confirmed it with a few foot soldiers just to confirm they weren't like booing the ref or anything like that. So I can see where the frustration was coming from, but overall it was a pretty good performance from Cavalry in the first half up until the 44th, 45th minute. For the 6th game this season, they managed to throw away a lead, which is definitely concerning if you're a Cavalry fan. So the second half was quite a bit different. Cavalry was definitely in desperation mode as they sought to get that equalizer. Really wasn't working out for them. They made a lot of substitutions to try and alter the flow of the game. And then I think it was in the 75th or 76th minute, they got a really lucky penalty call when Fraser Aird played a cross in, and the Halifax defender blocked it, and the referee immediately pointed to the spot, assuming that it had hit the Halifax defender's arm. Replays showed it definitely didn't hit his arm. It was his midriff, but really lucky for Cavalry. It was maybe a little bit of retribution. I don't know if that's the best word, but Cavalry did have a decent penalty shout in the first half when Mickey Kentav was, I believe, fouled in the box. So this could have been a case of, well, that should have been a penalty and it wasn't. This is a questionable penalty, so the referee blew his whistle. But
I kind of got that impression from the parts that I saw as well, that earlier play in the first half seemed like that was a more likely penalty than this one, but that wasn't called.
Yeah. And that penalty really created some excitement because it took a long time before Meyer Bevan got to finally take his shot. A Halifax player came right up to him and was saying something in his ear as he was getting ready to put the ball down. And that kind of started a little bit of a shoving match between the two teams. And then after Bevan scored his penalty, he ran to try and get the ball. And as often happens in cases like this, the opposing goalkeeper shielded the ball away from him and was trying to, delay the game getting back underway quickly. And Bevan kind of shoved him to the ground. And then a Halifax player came and uprooted at Bevan, who went flying. And then there was just this, full team. Both teams were just kind of pushing and shoving, and felt a bit like Cavalry versus Forge. But it finally got back underway, and it was a pretty frantic finish. Cavalry came really close in the 97th minute, believe it or not, 7th minute of stoppage time. Direct free kick from Ethan Beckford hit the post, and the whistle blew for full time shortly afterward. And you could see Beckford was pretty gutted after the final whistle, after hitting the post. He came so close to being the hero, but just wasn't meant to be.
Well, yeah, I think when I saw that shot, I was like, this is the dream situation for a young player just entering the league as he is, and it looked perfect, except it hit the post.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Beckford was the player to take the free kick. I asked about it in the press conference when Meyer Bevan was taking questions. He said Beckford hits goals in training from free kicks all the time, and he's the guy to take it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But It was a well taken free kick, just a couple inches to the right, and it would have been in.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk a little bit about the first League One Alberta matches that happened last Friday. At Macron, we had Foothills. They played the men's and the women's teams, both faced off against Scottish, and the women beat Scottish women 10-0, and the men's sides tied 1-1. And in Edmonton, Cavs U21 lost 3-0 to BTB men's, and the Blizzard defeated BTB women's 2-0.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had some commitments on Friday, so didn't watch any of the games that were in Calgary. But wow, 10-0. That's quite the score line. Kind of hope we don't see that kind of score line again this season. It'll be interesting to see if WFC does kind of continue to be dominant like that, or if it was maybe a case of the strongest team playing the weakest team right off the bat. I guess we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the matches go. But yeah, 10-0 is a pretty eye-catching score. No, Cavalry's U21 lost, but as we're going to play this interview quite quick, I think you'll hear from someone involved with that project who talks about how this Cavalry team is super young, and it's more about gaining experience and playing time at this level than trying to be a winning franchise, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess that would be probably a really good segue for us to get into our interview this week. This week we have Leon Hapgood. He is the technical director of Cavalry FC, and he is one of the assistant coaches for the CanPL team. And he's really quite involved in the whole youth setup. And we did an interview with him earlier today regarding the U21 team in League One Alberta, and also a little bit about the AMSL and just the general player development pathway that the Cavs have set up.
Yeah, and we also got a little bit of Leon's backstory, which I don't think a lot of people know about, but his own time, his time in England with Torquay United, and then his motivations and the reason why he came over to Canada and started coaching here with Foothills Soccer Club, and how that led to his current position with Cavalry. So it was great to hear from him and what he had to say about Cavalry's U21 program.
Okay, let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Leon Hapgood to the podcast. Leon is the technical director at Cavalry FC. He is an assistant coach with the CanPL team, and he is very involved in the youth setup and the U21 club. Thanks for joining us today, Leon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, we wanted to bring you on and talk a little bit about the youth program and about the U21 program specifically in League One Alberta. But maybe let's start off with a little bit of background and history about the U21 program and what's happened in previous years, and then where we're at today.
Yeah, I think to start way back to the PDL days, before the Cavalry CanPL team started, myself and Tommy were back at Foothills at the time, and we sort of envisioned building on from the U18 program in Alberta, where a lot of the clubs kind of have young players that go up to the U18 age group and then filter on and leave the clubs to go off to university, which is great. But what we saw a gap in the market was that sort of U20, 18 to U23 age group. So what we did is we sort of, Tommy in particular, built our PDL team at Foothills, which then eventually amalgamated to the Cavalry first team. And what we saw was that window was so relevant for the young players of the 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds to still be needed. So what we did, One Cavalry was launched over the last 4 or 5 years. What we then did is built an extension of our program at Cavs to continue what we'd started back 5 years ago, and really continue the pathway and open up more doors for players in the whole country, in particular in Alberta, to continue playing at a good level, and so we could continue their development beyond sort of 16, 17, 18.
Mm-hmm. And Leon, we've seen that pathway, and we've seen players who were signed with the U21s, and they get the opportunity to train with, maybe it's Foothills, the old PDL team, or the USL2 team first, or maybe if they're doing really well, they'd even train with the Cavalry first team. So you see that kind of pipeline. Do you kind of foresee that continuing this year, and how does League One kind of play into that now that Foothills and Cavalry have teams in L1A?
Yeah, so for us, I think if I can talk League One for a second, with BC and Ontario and Quebec and, having really good established League Ones, I think first and foremost, it was important Alberta was recognised for the standard of players that we have here at that level. So, for, Alberta soccer in particular to launch the exhibition season this year with the League One, what it enabled us to do is then place our best players within Alberta into a Cavalry environment to play at that level. Most of our players that actually kicked off our exhibition season last week against BTB Academy up in Edmonton were about 16, 17, 18 years old, which is phenomenal really for what we're looking at for games. Because if you think back, we had players like Dominic Sator and Elijah Adakubi, playing 40, 50 games at that USL2 PDL level before jumping into professional football. So that's why it's really important for our young players now to do the same. And we've actually had Victor Lattori, a great example, Arab and Pebble, come from that same environment that are now moved on to new clubs, obviously, in their careers. And we've had, Kamia. We've had Nico train with us this season. He's been on the bench a few times, coming out of the program. And first and foremost, I think it's important the players crack the training environment to then use that opportunity to then try and get first team minutes, whilst also playing and training with our sort of staff at that level.
Now, I know that there is the League One side, and then there's also the AMSL side. So can we talk a little bit about how those sides overlap? How are they connected? And I guess, how are they different?
I think it's more the standard. So from an AMSL perspective, it's a good league that's been around for many years. But with the League One, there's different standards involved and a high level of play, high caliber of play that's going to be coming into that level. So it gives us at Cavalry an opportunity to have really more games. So I think we have 12 to 14 games in the MSL, 10 to 12 games in League One. So it gives us an opportunity to have 20 to 22 games between April 1st and sort of August 15th in that window. And we can move players to one level or the next. So we might have a good 16, 17-year-old that we feel would be good right now to play in the MSL group. But we also have the group that's playing in the League One, which, those players can still play for, but they might be more suited to our 18 and 19s.
Right. Yeah. And Leon, I know, we noticed now that, for instance, Joseph Holiday is listed on the roster of the U21s. Do you think that we could see other players who are maybe named to Cavalry FC's senior team this year appear in lots of League One or AMSL games?
Yeah, League One in particular. We're working with the league to have under 21 playdowns from the first team. So Gareth Smith Doyle, Gote and Tigney, Willie Honor Emre, to name a few, that have all played minutes with our group in the under 21s. And I think if I talk about just pure football terms for a second, if I'm 16, 17 years old and I have the opportunity to play with first team players in a game, that's great for development. On top of all the training they get. So I think it's a two-edged sword. We got young players being able to play up with players that are with the first team regularly and that are on contract all time with the first team, but also giving those players like Gareth, like Willie, the opportunity to get those minutes they need, on a week-by-week basis. So when they get called into the first team, they're also ready as well. So I think it goes hand in hand for both a youth development opportunity and a play-down opportunity for a contracted player.
One thing I want to check about was with the coaching staff. So the coaching staff currently includes a couple of former players and current staffers in Oliver Minitel and Tofa Fakunle. I'm sure I'm messing that up. But
no, that's good. That's good.
But nobody is really specifically listed as a head coach. So can you sort of break down the roles and responsibilities between everyone and sort of what that looks like?
Yeah, so my role as the technical director is to oversee the whole project. So my primary role is obviously with the first team, but my secondary role is to look after the youth development. So I work with both Topher, Ollie and Jay Wilden as well. And what we decided was a pool of players was how we're going to look at it from a first team perspective. So in the League One, Ollie and Topher will run those game day events. And from a training ground perspective, Jonathan Wilden will also help them as part of our staff. Jonathan's been outstanding over the last few years in developing young players. And so we felt it was a good model to say that, rather than name a head coach, we have a coach cluster and they're all working with the players from an individual perspective, from a group perspective. But on game day at League One, it will be Oliver and Topher. Then my job in that is to set them up for best practice, make sure that they're aligned with the first team and what we're looking for, because it's easy to set up a team and try and win a game. But really, ours is a principle-based approach where we're looking at players and how many players can break through the system and get into our first team and beyond. Because really, it's about identifying the best talent in the market.
So, Leon, you mentioned the opening game against BTB last Friday. So we got more games coming up. Kind of a two-part question, but how did last Friday go for you? And what do you think fans should expect when they watch future matches?
I think what we saw was, the fact that we actually do need this environment for young players, because I've been in Calgary a long time and at 16, 17, the players need to really understand the next level. And to go from a youth program straight into the first team at Cavalry is going to be very, very difficult. Now, the jump is massive. So what I saw was the ability for us to bridge the gap and actually have players go on and express themselves. And there was a couple of boys, one boy in particular, Javi, who is a Southwest United player. We're really seeing good growth and development in him in just a short time, and since he's made the jump across. So what we saw was individual performances, and what I'm hoping to see as it goes on is the alignment with the first team and in terms of a structural perspective, in terms of opportunities, and really getting our fans to see how good the young players are and how, what a great job all the clubs are doing. It's certainly in the Alberta League, the AYSL levels, Foothills, Southwest, Rangers, to name a few, Blizzards, because they're doing a good job at developing players. What we're doing is giving them a springboard at 16, 17 to advance that development and then give them opportunities. So from a fan perspective, they'll get to see all the local talent coming through. And from a Cavalry perspective, we'll get to see individuals taking that opportunity and next step.
Actually, you mentioned something in your last comment here that I actually wanted to segue and talk about, that you moved to Calgary. I believe it was around 2008 after you were done playing.
Yeah.
And so what was your connection to Calgary in Canada previous to that? And what led you to making a life here as a coach?
Tommy kicked me when I was 16 and I never forgot it. It's probably the truth. No, I grew up playing in the youth academies back in England and came across Tommy a few times. He played for Swindon, I played for Torquay. So without going too deep into stories, there's a few times we played against each other and we have some good memories. And we went our separate ways at sort of, 19, 20 as you do. And he came to Calgary and I continued playing. And then a few years later, his brother Jonathan ended up being a young player at the club I was currently at, Torquay. And we reconnected and Tommy called me and he called me about his brother. How's it all going? And can I look after him? And then Jay connected us with sort of what Tommy was doing. So years later, we just got connected again. And I just started coaching in the UK because I knew that being a professional footballer, doesn't last forever. And I love the game so much that I wanted to stay in the game. And so I just got in contact with Tom again, and we connected around a project Foothills at the time he was building and was given the TD role to, and he said, would I be interested in moving to Calgary? And he brought me over in the summer of 2008 when it was the Stampede. So it was well done on his behalf because I had a really good time when I was here. And then, the rest is history. We've been with him for 15 years, as academy director at Foothills and then technical director when he moved to Cavs, and basically just tried to follow on all the work he's been doing and making sure that underneath that was always a solid foundation. And, one thing I've noticed, if I can continue saying it, one thing I noticed about here in Canada, it's never really been about the players. It's been about the infrastructure. And I think we're really seeing that now the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years. Now we're creating more professional opportunities for kids to stay here rather than leave. There's been some really good players here. And I say that to my friends back home all the time. Like, you want to see the talent in Canada and Alberta and Ontario, BC. They're good players. There just needs to be a good infrastructure for them to be seen. So hopefully we're starting to do that now.
Yeah, that kind of answered our next question as well, Leon, which was about your first impressions of Calgary as a city and as like a footballing town. I like what you had to say about infrastructure. Sometimes I think back to, even as recently as 2009 or 10, we really didn't have that many turf fields, or we didn't have anything really for playing indoor, like an outdoor style of game indoors. So what has the growth been like in your, 14, 15 years here from that side of things?
I remember coming over and we actually at the time were playing an indoor game, and I went to watch an indoor game, and it was where they have the boards and 3 lines and you go on and off every 2 minutes, and I was just lost in the game. And I remember speaking with Tommy saying, I don't really understand what's going on. Why are players going on and off? And that obviously over time with the hockey relationships, I got to understand it. So I think just from that perspective, that these young players in tier 1, 2 and 3 now are playing 7v7 and 9v9 regularly on really improved turf facilities. Foothills, I think, paved the way for that as an independent club, built a beautiful facility and great work there. But you're seeing now all the other facilities popping up all over the place. And all that's doing is creating a better environment for young players, especially within the game. 7v7, 9v9 is certainly a much better improvement. And then you're seeing the progression in talent technically in the 11v11 games now as we're coming through, and the depth is much better. So what I've seen is through infrastructure, through good people that understand, the vision of football itself and the journey of what football really is, there is change. And I think it can still get better culturally. And I think it is getting better. I think someone told me the other day, there's just as many kids playing soccer in this country than there is hockey now, right? So I think that's a wonderful thing for us. And if I can speak for the men's national team, the work that John and his staff have done, it can only, in my opinion, the next 5 years should be exciting. And it should be really exciting for any young players coming through.
Hey, I think so too. Well said, Leon.
One thing I want to ask you while we're on the topic of growing up in your earlier career, it's my understanding that, and I'm again probably wrecking it, Torquay, they were relegated this year, weren't they? Or they're down a division again?
Yeah, Torquay's actually, I can relate Torquay a lot to where we are now. Torquay's a very community-based club, but they've always had a really good history of developing young players and selling them on, and then surviving every 5-10 years from finances coming in. They're a local community club in Torquay. and they've done really well. Probably punched above their weight for many years, if I'm honest, based on the catchment area and the reach they have on players. But they went through a difficult time a few years ago, got relegated. Then their current manager, Gary Johnson, got them back up to a really good level. And then this year, they just got relegated again on the last day against Wrexham, who are having their own great story themselves, aren't they, right now? As you probably are well aware with Ryan Reynolds. So I'm a Torquay boy at heart. I played for them as a youth player coming through. I would love to see them get back to the successes they had years ago and get on that journey, but it's not easy, right? And they have to sort of fix their own issues now, and hopefully they can under Gary. He's a great manager, and hopefully they can get back on track again.
Yeah. What I know about Torquay is Lee Sharp, the Manchester United player. I remember he started his career there. I think that would have been back in the late 80s or early 90s, but I read his autobiography. It was a really good one, and I really liked his chapters about Torquay United in particular.
Yeah, I think I was an academy player. I might have been 10 or 11 at the time. And I remember Lee Sharp at the club. I know his brother John as well. He was at the club for a while. And I remember the day, I was a kid at the time, when Alex Ferguson came down to Torquay and wanted to sign him and took him away. And I think that really helped put Torquay on the map at the time, actually, to be honest.
For sure. Well, I'm sure you have lots of great stories about Torquay, but I think I have one more question about kind of reining it back to like Calgary soccer. But what would you think is needed this season for Cavalry's U21 season to be considered a successful one?
Opportunities for those players to train and be amongst the first team. I think we've got to be mindful that we're not chasing results as in wins, and that we're actually using the game time at that level to give players opportunities to perform at their maximum, and then to really evaluate and assess whether at that level they're doing well enough to jump into the first team environment. So if I can have 2, 3, 4, 5 players train up with the first team, be around the first team environment, even sit on the bench, even play. We have Michael Harms, as I said, and Nico Marichuk have already done it. And then really look for the next Victor and the next Arabam to move on, and that's what it really should be about. It's about individual players. So if I can say at the end of the season, we've had 4 or 5 players join the first team, training environment, be around what we're doing, and then continue the growth of that program for the year 1, 2, and 3, whereas we look at different age groups as it grows, and we have different training ideas and different plans. That would be a success in our first sort of inaugural season in League One. Exhibition, yeah.
Sounds good, Leon. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your insight, and best of luck with the upcoming games and training sessions ahead.
Thanks, Scott. It was a lot. Anytime, it was a lot of fun. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Thanks again to Leon Hapgood for doing the interview. Any thoughts, Scott, about the interview before we move on to talk about what's coming up this weekend?
Not too much. No, I think it was good to hear from Leon about the U21 program and some of the focuses for that program heading into the rest of the 2023 season. It is neat that you're seeing players who are, getting some minutes for Cavalry's senior squad also getting to play at a level that they're probably a little more used to and that they're a little more dominant in. It shows the gulf between the two levels, but it also shows how useful the League One Alberta system is going to be here when it's fully established.
Yeah, I think the League One Alberta, this is a nice little experiment, I think, but I think we're going to really, if this evolves how I think most of us expect it will, it could really be an interesting and useful pathway.
It's crazy the pathway that players have nowadays. I mean, before it was like you finished U18, you went to university, you played AMSL in the summertime, and that was pretty much it. But now it seems like there's so many different options for players once they hit 16, 17, 18. So it's pretty great to see.
Yeah, it's just totally different. And I think it would be interesting at some point to talk to some local players who were that age, 20 years ago. And I could imagine that a lot of them probably feel that if the opportunities that were available now were available then, who knows what the possibilities would have been. But that's how it goes. So.
Yeah, just like Leon was saying with regards to like the infrastructure, the changes to, field availabilities and the type of soccer that's played in the winter, for instance, compared to even a dozen years ago, shortly after he first arrived in Canada. It's night and day. I personally, like, I didn't feel like I was playing in the dark ages when I was, 15, 16, 17, but looking back, we really didn't have much. And like, we were still playing boarded soccer. We weren't even playing futsal yet. Like, that was considered innovative. So to see like the opportunities that players who are coming through the system now have, it is great for them, for sure.
All right, well, let's talk about this weekend, and we have a few things going on. We've got, we'll start with Cavalry, and they have a home match this weekend on Sunday, scheduled for 5 p.m., I believe. But I guess the question right now is, the game does not seem like it's a done deal based on environmental and smoke conditions.
No, and Cavalry did reach out to, I guess, fans and members today through email and social media to issue a statement that the game is a tentative go-ahead, but the situation can change pretty quickly depending on how the wind blows. I mean that literally. If you're not in like the Calgary area right now, it is still very, very smoky. Smoke from northern and central Alberta wildfires has wafted down from the north into the Calgary area and just blanketed the whole city in a very thick layer of smoke. And it really is not, it's not like you could play through this. It would be unhealthy. It would be dangerous, I feel. And we could see this game postponed or delayed. But at the moment, I think it has dissipated slightly since yesterday even. So depending on how Friday night, Saturday goes, I guess it'll probably be a pretty late call as to whether or not this game is going to be played. But no, it couldn't have gone ahead today, I think.
That would have been tough if it would have been today, which we're recording this on Thursday. But even yesterday was probably worse. And yeah, it'll probably turn into what's happening that day, because even to the point where it's not a good environment even for fans to be outside for a couple hours, never mind, like, obviously the concerns with the athletes out there exerting themselves, but it's not even a good environment for just to sit around in the stands.
No, definitely not. I've been limiting my own kind of amount of time that I've been outside since Tuesday, Wednesday, which is frustrating because I think if it wasn't so smoky, it would have been really nice these last few days. Like, the temperature wise, it would have been perfect. No, it did rain very little, I guess, on Tuesday night, but even Wednesday, it was almost as bad as it was on Tuesday. So I think we're going to need either some heavy rainfall to improve the conditions, or the wind needs to just blow it somewhere else. But no, I'm curious to see if this game is going to go ahead.
Besides the Cavs, there are a couple other matches this week. Foothills is playing, I believe. The women's team is playing BTB on Friday night, and on Saturday night they are playing Cavalry U21, and that both those matches are here in town. So on Wednesday, Lethbridge will play the Dinos, and also Foothills will play Southwest United. Yeah, so okay.
I guess these leagues are also, it'll depend on the smoke condition, but as long as conditions approve, there should be plenty of soccer being played in the coming days in Calgary.
Yeah, sounds good. So next week, there won't be a podcast. I will be away. Hopefully I'm going to have a couple of good soccer stories when I return. I guess we'll see, but they won't be Calgary related. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast by using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to the website at yycsoccer.com for more info about how to subscribe or to leave a question or comment. You can also follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.